Hello and welcome to Let's Pod This. Friends, welcome back to another week. We had an election and we're going to talk all about it. Joining me, of course, is my co-host, Emily Stacy. Hi, Em. How are you?
Oh, hi. How are you?
I'm great. Welcome back.
It's been a week.
It's been a genuinely crazy week. Tuesday, obviously, we had a big election and we're going to talk about it. And I think we should go, let's just jump in. I think we should go from
Sure.
the ballot from the bottom up.
Okay.
Everyone goes top down. Let's go bottom up. We'll start with state questions. We'll end with governor, and then we'll look ahead to November. Sound good?
Sound good.
Great. So there were two state questions on the ballot, state question 844 and 846. 846 was voter ID, right? It was basically
Right.
putting voter ID into the Constitution,
Yeah,
and it passed
it did.
as we thought it would.
Yeah, I've been describing this to my classes as sort of a nothing burger. I'm sure people who are very fervent about this don't like it described that way. But right, we're just enshrining existing state law into the Constitution. So for me, it felt a little bit like, a hat on a hat moment, if you will, politically.
Yeah.
You're right.
Well, and the voter ID as a law was passed by a vote of the people in 2010, which was state question 746. So it's ironic that it was exactly 100 state questions ago. That just requires people to present a valid government-issued photo ID or
Right.
their voter registration card. It was pretty broadly supported back then. I forget the actual numbers, but I feel like it was greater than 60% of voters approved it. And so that's why we were not at all surprised that voters also approved this one, although at a much lower rate, I think. And I think there was
Yeah.
some skepticism, even from people like Jake Merrick, who I saw posted on Facebook, that was like, he encouraged people to vote no on both state questions, which I thought was
Yeah. Interesting.
unexpected. Yeah, interesting. Exactly.
Yeah.
The other state question, of course, was one that I think we talked more about on this program.
Yeah.
Both you and I did a crossover episode with Erica Wright from the Rural Schools Coalition
Mhm.
about state question 844. This one was really in the weeds as far as policy
Yeah.
goes. And it went down in flames. It lost
Flames, man. Yeah, my students were actually incredibly interested in this. I ended up doing dissections of the state question in all of my AFG classes on Monday before the vote on Tuesday. And, we're covering federalism at this point. And so it just seemed like a really good example of sort of that hyper federalism, right? Where those local and county governments were like, hey, man,
yeah.
we're not real. We're a little sauce of this central government thing. We don't care if it's DC or Oklahoma City, taking authority to decide how much, when, et cetera.
Right.
The funding scheme for those counties to be paid back those ad valorem taxes. And so, for me, and I know I'm getting ahead of our conversation, but when the AP called that race at about 8:15, 8:20, and at that point it was over 60% in the no column, I thought, man, Mazzei's going to pull this out, and
Yeah.
we can go into that later on. But I was gobsmacked, right? Very rarely do we see state questions go down in flames to that effect. I mean, going in recent memory, even the teacher pay raise. I mean, we said no, hell no, but not to this effect. So
Yeah.
I don't think it was. I mean, I thought it was going to go down, but I did not think it was going to go down in just flames like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
really surprising to 73%. That's
Yeah. I mean, I think I thought it was 76%. Either way,
was it?
it was a lot.
It was over 70%.
It was. And I think a couple of other important data points just to demonstrate how broadly this was opposed.
Mhm.
It failed in every county. It also failed, not just in every county, but in almost every precinct. There are 1,984 precincts and only 4 or 5 did it pass. And in those, all of those precincts have like fewer than 50 people or fewer than 100 people.
Mhm.
Most of them have like fewer than 10. So it really was just a complete failure across the board. And broadly, it wasn't like, we look a lot at the maps and see where support is for certain candidates and that kind of thing. And that wasn't even a factor
Yeah.
here. It was pretty
No.
across the board, evenly spread. There was
Mhm.
no like geographic thing.
Yeah. No.
And it's I mean, to be fair, it was complicated. There was almost no yes campaign there.
Yeah.
So voters didn't know what it was. No one had told them this was a good thing. And there
Right.
was just enough, I think, suspicion of the legislature in
Yeah.
general. And the only messaging was from a pretty broad coalition of organizations. We were a part of that were saying, hey, this is a really risky
Mhm.
deal. And we think it's going to be bad for local
Yeah.
jurisdictions, schools, and counties. And so a big defeat. I will say this was a big win for the people of Oklahoma, for local communities, school systems, all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So if we're
I
looking for
yeah.
highlights on the ballot,
Yeah.
this is one.
Yeah, this one in particular, I think, and I wonder how much of the messaging on tax cuts, from the now Republican candidate for governor, how much that impacted, folks thinking about this, right? It's great to cut individual income taxes. It's great to cut property taxes. It's great to cut ad valorem taxes, but at some point, we're going to have to provide services to the citizens of Oklahoma.
Hmm.
And those counties and municipal governments are already hurting from the grocery sales tax cut, right? The elimination of that, massive tax, which we all are happy about, me included, right? But we have to make up that revenue somewhere, and so this was just an overwhelming kind of middle finger to
Yeah.
Oklahoma City.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So go back to the drawing board, boys, if you want to change the funding scheme, because it's going to need to be more detailed. I think folks, I want to say that the vagueness, in the ballot title certainly didn't help things out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this morning, so we are recording this on Thursday, the 27th. And I also happen to record KOSU's This Week in Oklahoma Politics on Thursday morning. So I've been talking about this stuff all day.
Mhm.
And Jennifer Monies, it was on
Mhm.
KOSU with me this week, and she pointed out that State Question 844 was originally supposed to be part of a kind of a package of, five or six or seven legislatively referred state questions that all dealt with kind of tax related stuff,
Mhm.
but most of them couldn't get past the Senate,
Mhm.
and so they kind of fell apart. So this one ended up kind of being as like this lone wolf out there.
Yeah.
There will be a state question, I believe, on the ballot in November dealing
Mhm.
with property tax. It was
Yep.
also part of that deal.
Yep.
But I think, if there was some concern that some of these measures might not be popular, and so some legislators were hesitant or reluctant
Yeah.
to pass them, this supports that
Uh-huh.
perspective. I think that
Yeah.
like, oh, maybe we should go back to the drawing board, as you said.
Yeah.
I think and think about it. Fascinating.
I don't think it bodes. I don't think that any future votes on taxation bode well. Elimination of taxation or changing funding schemes at this point. Look, we're in the middle of Oklahoma. Affordability is a real issue, and
Mhm.
when people start asking again, okay, it's great. We want to eliminate taxes, but where am I getting my emergency, ambulance services from? Who's paving the potholes in my neighborhood street, right? Where are the crossing guards, right? I mean, just the things that actually touch our lives, right? State politics, it can be distant from us. In national politics, certainly distant from us. These are the kinds of things that reach out and touch us. How long are we
Yeah.
waiting for an ambulance to show up? How are
Right.
trash services, functioning, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah.
I don't know,
And
dude.
I mean, for education, like I don't think
Yeah,
anyone wants to risk anything like, hey, we barely have enough to get by. We have a
exactly.
record number of alternatively certified teacher. We don't even have
Hmm.
like, quote unquote real teachers. They are real
Yeah,
teachers, but you know what I mean. Traditionally
right,
path teachers,
right,
degree teachers in education, that
right.
thing. So it's just a big shift.
It
Okay,
is.
well let's move up the ballot. There were a lot of local stuff on the ballot this month, which I didn't expect because I didn't have any of that at my house in Oklahoma City. But
Hmm.
Tulsa had a whole bunch of city council races that
Yeah.
they do every 2 years. Oklahoma City does theirs in odd numbered years. Tulsa does theirs in even numbered years, and they do it in August. And then like a runoff is in November, which is a little different. And then
Hmm.
a lot of rural counties had municipal bonds, tax
Hmm.
related issues, that kind of thing. And I think we've seen how some of that, we're not going to go through all of them because
Yeah.
that's impossible. But I think we'll talk about some of the impact there. I will note in Tulsa, because it's a big city, it was interesting that they had one, two, three, four city council members reelected this week. They also had three other council members who were reelected by default when they filed for office back in June. So that's
Okay.
7 out of the 9 members. There is one seat, the mayor is one of them, and then there's one seat that incumbent councilor Vanessa Hall Harper fell short, and so excuse me, so she did not win outright, and there'll be a runoff there, and then there's like one other member. Pete Reagan is a new
Yeah.
member of the city council. So, I mean, it was a lot of elections, and then basically it was kind of the same. It's like the same verse, second verse, same as the first. As I'm trying to look for
Right.
the words here. I did see something about Lori Decker Wright. She won her 5th term on Tulsa City Council
Wow.
and won pretty handedly, which is interesting. But I mean, by like about 1,000 votes, so 57%, which was pretty big. And I think that was pretty similar to the other candidates who won. The biggest one was for Anthony Archie, former teacher and minister, who also runs a candy company, which is
Hmm.
fascinating.
It is.
But he won with 75% of the vote up there, which is pretty substantial. So, congrats to all the returning Tulsa City Council members. I guess I don't know
Yeah.
if that's good or bad or how people feel about it, but I think that's what we should expect to see.
Yeah.
Mostly some of the same in Tulsa. I'm very excited to see what all Mayor Nichols is doing up there, though. I feel like he's
Me
really kind
too.
of leaning into public engagement and trying to build a different vibe. I mean, I think Mayor Bynum did a pretty good job at this, but it's Tulsa is an interesting town, and I think the differences between Tulsa and Oklahoma City are really fascinating to me, both in terms
Yeah.
of how their government is organized and how I don't know, the vibes, like the personality of the community
Yeah.
is very different despite all of our similarities.
Hmm. Agree.
And then Oklahoma County had a couple of county commissioner races that
Hmm.
were somewhat high profile. The more contentious one, I think, was on District 1,
One. Yeah.
incumbent Jason
Jason.
Lowe, yeah, against challenger Kayla Baker.
Hmm.
This was one that I saw a lot of I don't know, the more progressive activists like posting
Yeah.
about. But Jason Lowe
Interesting.
won pretty
Handily.
handily.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
70 something percent again.
Hmm.
So that was interesting. And then I don't know. I mean, there were some like legislative seats. One of the Freedom Caucus founders,
Yeah.
Dana Preto,
Prito.
lost
Yeah.
lost their seat. And then otherwise, there wasn't much. I mean, because I think it's a lot of legislators won by default,
Fault. Exactly. Right.
or they won in the June primary, or they've got a challenger in November, and so we're kind of waiting around. But it's felt like kind of a flat year for some of that stuff. I think November is going to be the big challenge.
So I think linking a point that I made to you in text messages at 6:30 this morning, I almost want to say that the Pareto loss follows again this trend of folks adopting national political performative politics, right, and adopting more of that Freedom Caucus, Liberty Caucus, MAGA, whatever you want to refer to it as, that brand, and it's just not translating in the same way that it was, 8 years ago, 10 years ago,
Mhm.
even, remnants of the Tea Party, if you want to add them in there. Because certainly the Freedom Caucus leans more towards the Tea Party than it, and certainly does MAGA. But it's adopted, right, and used the momentum from the MAGA and the National Party. And I just, again, don't see it translating in the way that it, a lot of, again, the GOP want it to, in the state and places like Texas as well. It just it's a really interesting time for party politics, because again, I don't know that folks are in the upper echelons, right, in the leadership, are really paying attention to what's actually going on with the electorate on the ground. period. So the
Yeah.
Pareto loss means that Lonnie Paxton, who is, pretty middle of the road, is more than likely, about, I would say 90% likely to keep his position
Yeah.
as pro tem. And that was not the case whenever we were last talking about this with Sean, earlier in the legislative session.
Right.
We had pontificated, differently if these elections had gone another way. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I mean, just so listeners remember, the legislature votes for who this within their caucus. So right now, the Republican
Right.
caucus selects the new Speaker of the House and the new Pro Tem of the Senate the year prior. So they did it back in the spring, but then they have to like have another vote to like
Right.
ratify those. And sometimes when it's contentious, that can change. And so
Yes.
I'm certain that Lonnie Paxton is feeling a little bit better about his chances of holding
Yeah.
his pro tem ship.
Yeah.
Well, Emily, speaking of, we'll say the wily fringes of our parties, right? So the Tea Party and
Yeah.
whatever's
Yeah.
happening right now on the Democratic side, like the DSA, the Democratic Socialists. I mean, we've certainly
Delicious.
our listeners have probably seen headlines from other states where you've got Al Said and like bigger name candidates, Zoran Mamdani in New York. There's this like whatever's happening right now. Some people will call it the Tea Party on the left. I don't know if that's quite right. Um, but this subset of the Democratic Party, who tend to be younger, more ethnically diverse, more economically populist, I think. And that, of course, we had an election. So it's happening here in the Democratic primary runoff for the U.S. Senate seat. That was between Jim Priest and
Mm-hmm.
Nikayla Jasmine Thomas. Um, Nikayla identifies as a DSA candidate, and
Right.
she won pretty handedly over Jim Priest, who was a establishment Democrat candidate. He's run for state office at least once, maybe more than once. Nonprofit professional, someone who's been around. He is an older white man, whereas Nikayla Jasmine Thomas is a younger woman of color and Native American, I believe. And so, Emily, what do you think? I mean, first of all, do you think this is the Democrats' Tea Party? And
I
do
love
you
it.
think do you think that Thomas has any shot against Kevin Hurd in November?
No, no, but I do think she is going to make that man work. I love that part of this whole thing. So, fun fact, right? We were a pretty populist socialist state
Mm-hmm.
whenever we were created back in 1907. Again, the founders, the Oklahoma founders, wanted to leave as much power with the people as humanly possible, right? As is evidenced by our weakened executive branch, why you vote for attorney general, like gov, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't happen in other states. I love, right? So just the history lesson to show, just to demonstrate that, socialism is not antithetical to Oklahoma. In fact, it was kind of baked in to our founding. I absolutely adore this. A young woman of color, Native, right? So, coming out of the woodwork to challenge Jim Priest, who's a perennial Democratic candidate. This is his third, fourth time, running for office. So he's not unknown within the Oklahoma Democratic Party ranks. She handily beat him.
Mm-hmm.
She was over 60%, which is, again, pretty shocking for a Democratic primary with somebody who has somewhat name recognition like a Jim Priest to be just obliterated by a young, scrappy, young lady coming in and proclaiming herself as a democratic socialist. This was not something that I clocked, right? I think we have elements of that. Bernie Sanders obviously did very well here in 2016. And so it's not surprising, but also a little surprising. The demographics, I think, that are really interesting, right? So we've not plugged Non-Doc and Trace put together this really great interactive map, and you can look at the election results county by county, but they also did a county demographic breakdown, which I thought was really dope. And specifically in this race, the breakdown I thought was incredibly interesting. Wealthier folks, college educated folks, folks. But the racial lines are really, really interesting, I think. So I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but go look at that interactive map because it's really incredibly interesting. And we'll talk more about it when we get to the gubernatorial race, because I think we're going to have a whole podcast on one of those county demographic breakdowns.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And yes, these maps are incredible on NonDoc's page. I'm looking at the one for this race right now, and a couple of things, listeners. If you go to nondoc.com, there's a little button right at the top that says, view our election maps or something. And one of the coolest things, it gives you the breakdown. So it shows that Thomas beat Priest 61% to 39%, and then it breaks down. And I'm going to be a spoiler here. The wealthiest, the top 12 per capita, so the 12 wealthiest counties 9 of them went for Thomas, and 10 of the 12 poorest counties went for Priest. And for whatever reason, I think I expected that to be opposite. I don't know that I would have articulated it, but now same thing. I mean, so basically Priest won the poorest counties, the least college educated counties, the most rural counties, and
the whitest.
And the whitest and the most native, though, which is interesting since she is Native American.
Yeah.
But that basically means that Thomas won the most dense, which is like basically the urban counties.
Right.
And there's, I don't know, you would actually qualify 9 of these counties as being urban.
Right.
I guess it's a certain density there. She also won the college educated and the wealthiest, which I think speaks to maybe who the Democratic base is, right? That the Democratic base that will vote in a primary runoff election in August on a hot day are probably wealthy, college-educated people who live in urban areas.
And have the luxury to participate, time to participate.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is really fascinating, maybe my favorite feature of these maps, is there's a little navigational box in the corner of the map. You can choose between precincts and counties. Now, again, the size of all of these things, the size of a county, the size of a precinct, does not necessarily indicate the number of people within them. And, I complain every election about the election maps that show all 77 counties being red or whatever. I'm like, well, first of all, you should show the gradient within them, which is a great way to do it by showing precincts. And you should at least demonstrate, if the map is like red and blue or whatever, that not all these counties have the same number of people. And these maps on NonDoc, there's a box to say size by votes. You check it, and it changes it to squares, where the size of the square for each county represents the number of votes in that county. And you immediately see that Oklahoma County, Tulsa County, Cleveland County, Canadian County, Comanche County, Payne County, are like far and away, especially Oklahoma and Tulsa, are just enormous compared to a lot of them. And these little tiny counties like Beaver and Cimarron, I mean, in Cimarron County, there were 29 votes cast in this election. So like, as if we're talking about, poor counties and rural counties, this is one that Priest won, but he only won it 21-8 because there's not that many people, not that many Democrats out there.
Yeah. That's interesting.
But especially when you look at, I think bigger races like the governor or even the superintendent, and you break it up by county with that size by votes, it tells a very different story. So
I agree.
Well, there were 2 other runoffs for statewide races that we should at least mention, right? Insurance commissioner. Marty Quinn versus Bob Sullivan. Bob Sullivan won. Everyone's like, okay.
Right.
I don't, fine. Most people don't even know that we have an insurance commissioner or know what they do, even less.
He's palatable and he'll be great. He's worked in the industry for a very long time. He will be a good insurance dude.
Right. I think there is some interest, right, in having an insurance dude who stands up for the will of the people and tries to push back against some of these insurance companies, whether or not, the AG and the current AG or the future AG, whoever it may be, will continue to pursue that. We'll see. Yeah. And then labor commissioner, I thought was moderately more interesting. It was between 2 legislators, Kevin West and John Pfeiffer. I felt like Pfeiffer was the more establishment candidate. Kevin West is one of the most conservative members of the
He
legislature.
is.
I looked at his website just yesterday for his campaign
Hmm.
about for labor commissioner, and he has kind of a policy agenda, but I'm really confused about what it is or how it'll look implemented.
Sure.
Um, and I think I think both these guys have opponents in November, but
Yeah.
Kevin West received more votes than any other statewide elected official in this election, which is unusual.
Interesting.
And I think he is a pretty hardcore
He
America
is.
first
Yeah.
candidate. And that could potentially have some impacts, I think, on how the Labor Commission does their work. But they're not really like a policy shop.
Uh,
They're more of
Not really.
a bureaucratic agency, right?
Yeah. Lots of red tape, lots of rubber stamping.
Yeah,
Yeah.
regulations. They inspect
Yeah.
elevators, I know,
Exactly.
escalators.
Right. As long as the trains run on time, I think we'll be fine. There's not a lot of opportunity to impact, right? As you mentioned, policy and
Right,
or to insert ideological bias or biases in the department itself.
right. He's not going to deregulate inspections of carnival rides or anything.
Right. Yeah, I can't imagine.
I don't even think he has the authority. Like, I think
Yeah.
really the agency head, because it's somewhat funny to go back to what you said about the origins of Oklahoma and our populist upbringing, but why we elect the labor commissioner is because we wanted someone who was our guy against the corporations, right? We
Yep.
wanted someone to defend the rights of the people
Hmm.
against these corporations that were more interested in making a profit
Yeah.
than protecting the people. But as someone who has been a legislator, essentially like a politician in
Yeah.
the legislature, now that he is essentially like an elected bureaucrat, right? Like this is his job is
Yeah.
now
Right.
to enforce the
Course, the
laws.
policies that he used to make. Yeah.
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 And so, one thing that could be helpful in this role is to have a good relationship with the legislature. And I don't
Hmm.
know. I mean, I think he's
Yeah,
does for
he's
the
fine.
most part.
Yeah.
Um, but it'll be, and I expect most of us will forget about Kevin West, after November.
I mean, we've had some pretty spicy labor commissioners in recent, at least in this century. So hopefully, yes, the idea is that you forget about your labor commissioner. Yes,
Yeah.
that is
Right. You
that's
want
the
them to
goal.
do a great job so much that they don't bother you and they just
Right.
do their job.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't. Again, I don't know that Kevin West winning over Pfeiffer doesn't come down to that more America first, that more MAGA, that more nationally tuned in, voice and adoption of those that platform. Again, we didn't see any advertisements, etc. But if you did seek out that information and go to his website and do your, the work you're supposed to be doing as a democratic citizen, and knowing why you're voting for that person, you would have stumbled upon the fact that he's extremely conservative, and that would have swayed your vote one way or another. So yeah, I'm sticking to my
Interesting.
story, man. Sticking to my story. National politics is has impacted Oklahoma elections in a way that again I've not or we've not really been privy to in my lifetime up until this last 10 or so years.
Hmm. Yeah, it's what a time to be alive, Emily.
Yay.
um, we um, that means we've reached the point in this conversation to discuss the governor's race,
Right,
which
have
is
we
the
reached the apex, Andy?
we apex, right? We're half an hour in. This is perfect,
Okay, great.
listeners. Thanks for going up the roller coaster, and now it's just like going down.
Exactly.
So I'll just do the top lines, and then we'll just dish,
Okay.
I guess. Top line is Mike Mazzei won so narrowly, just over 2,000 votes. To put this in perspective, as I mentioned earlier, there are 1,984 precincts, which means basically if one household in every precinct had switched, just one household in every precinct had switched, Drummond would have won by several hundred votes.
Mhm.
And that is wild. I think this might be the closest runoff for governor we've ever had in state history.
I would expect so. We'll have to get some history on that, but I can't remember one in recent history that's been nearly this close.
Yeah. I mean, the number of text messages that I got, not just, I
Hmm.
mean, obviously you and I were texting and, several
No,
of our
no,
like
but from
close
the
friends, but
parties,
like
yeah. Hmm.
just people being like, oh my, like what's happening? Like, why is it so close? And like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's interesting. I heard that there were a lot of legislators at Getner Drummond's watch party at the time the results were coming in, and then they all had to like kind of leave and
Fail.
make their way over to Maisie's
Yeah.
party to say congrats. And um, really unexpected. I mean, I think I heard Pat McFerrin on the Frontiers podcast yesterday talk about where these votes came from. Because
Hmm.
it was pretty close in the primary, but
Yes.
McCurtain County, down in the southeastern corner of the state,
Hmm.
I think Mazie got 700 and something more votes in this race than he did in June from that county alone, and that's almost
Interesting.
25% of how many. So he picked up quite a few votes from some of these rural counties. And if you look
Hmm.
at that map again, the non-doc page does
Yes.
great. The For one, they used contrasting colors, which is way
I
better than
know,
the state
right?
election board, which had like shades of beige.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
but
crazy.
the when you look at that map
The swing
of this
since
race,
June.
yeah, it shows that
Wow.
um, Drummond won all of the northwest part of the state, and
Yeah.
then there's like a line that kind of goes. It's basically just southeast of I-44, right?
Hmm.
And then the southeastern part of the state went for Mazie. It really looks like a cold front coming in, and there's like still
Kind of.
heat down in the southeast, and the rest of the state has already cooled off. But man,
Yeah, that's wild. Did you see there's a feature on there to the swing since June, so that McCurtain County, it was a 21 percentage swing to Mazie since
oh wow, oh I
from
did not
yeah,
see this.
yeah, it's pretty dope,
That's fascinating.
right?
And I mean that whole like ring, Haskell, McIntosh, Hughes,
Hmm. The
Pontotoc
entirety of
County.
it.
Yeah, somehow Johnston County kind of stuck out there. But yeah, really interesting. Also, the
Mhm.
thing that I forget about, and this is why I talk about the size of the counties, when you like move your mouse over all these counties and you see that, some of these counties like are um, a few hundred votes, like was this Kiowa County, 450 to 361. Okay, you
Mhm.
forget that these whole counties just have Roger Mills County, 283 to 205. Not that
Uh-huh.
many votes, right? Of course, you come to like Oklahoma County, okay, you're talking like 30,000 here and there. Uh, but yeah, when people say their vote doesn't count,
Oh,
I
it
I
does.
was trying to do ads or videos on social media of like, guys, some of these races are going to come down to just a few votes, and here we are,
Literally. Yeah.
top of the ticket, came down to
Yep.
just a few votes. Do
Yeah,
you?
man.
So I think we should talk about turnout some and like some of the narratives around this, like what happened
Please.
here. How did Drummond lose? How did Mazie win? I mentioned earlier the impact of those local issues, and I haven't gone back through to look yet at all the counties that had some sort
Mhm.
of local issue.
Oh, yeah.
But I
Mhm.
will point out one that was on the ballot, but is also a local issue. State Question 844 that dealt with the tax stuff.
Right.
It lost statewide, but the county that would have been most negatively impacted was Mays County. That's where
Mhm.
um, Pryor and the
Yeah.
Mid-America Industrial Park is. So they receive like $40 million a year in
Mhm.
property tax from
Right.
this industrial park. And had this formula changed, they would have undoubtedly lost some of that. It was a big deal.
Yeah.
And so that measure failed in Mays County 87% to 13, just walloped. Uh, and so that's an issue that was a statewide issue, but locally impacted it. And I think the turnout in that county was like, I don't know, like 94. It was like a ton of people turned out to vote out of
Mm.
the proportion of people in that county because they were like, oh my gosh, we have something to lose here. Same
Yeah.
thing in, I think Ottawa County had some sort of like local tax thing. There was a sheriff scandal and all of that.
Mhm.
Also had a really high turnout. Maybe that's the county that had the highest turnout. But when
Interesting.
you see those local issues, then it can change who the voter is, right? Like,
Yeah.
um,
Absolutely.
do you looking at the map and based on your, you know, encyclopedic knowledge of Oklahoma politics,
Mm.
do you think those local issues, like, would you point to that as the main thing here, or one of the things here that decided this race?
Yeah, I mean, local issues certainly are going to bring people out, right? The milkshake brings the voice to the yard, right? So those local issues, again, that reach out and touch people and impact their everyday lives, those are going to be most motivational, right, for people to get out. I again, man, I just don't know in terms of the breakdown and the turnout. It it's wild. Like I'm a little gobsmacked by how many folks, how many counties, number one, swung towards Mazzei from Drummond since June. But then also, I want to also note that you have a lot of folks, again, the people who turn out in a runoff election are going to be fervent, right? They're going to be your most devout, party loyalist, if you will, right? They are the ones who are most dyed in the wool, want to, most invested, right,
Mm-hmm.
in the results of the election. And I think what I'm most surprised by is how close it was in terms of, again, there was a pretty clear split between Mazzei and Drummond ideologically, going back to, the MAGA, the national, party brand versus Drummond, who was really trying to play, traditional old school Oklahoma politics on the back of a horse, kissing the babies, right? All of the things versus the dark ads versus the more divisive rhetoric, etc. Drummond really wasn't himself playing that role. He may have let his pack and other third parties, do some of the mudslinging, but he himself kept it pretty clean. The fact that Mazzei was endorsed by Trump incredibly early, right, even before we voted in the primary election and endorsed by Trump. Right. We're not talking about some mandates, right, for MAGA policies. And Mazzei himself is really an unknown in terms of his policy statements. He's made some of those proposals. He's said some things and put out some statements, the smelter plant, things like that, that he's had to immediately respond to. But in terms of what this guy is going to do based on his state Senate record, based on his time as Secretary of Finance, he's a large unknown. And I think some of the demographic breakdowns on the non-doc result page tell us that, like the wealthiest, for example, wealthy Oklahomans want to be certain, right? Businesses, corporations, they want to be certain about a candidate or an elected official's economic policies. They want to know how they're going to invest, how they're going to deal with regulation, deregulation, etc. So it's not surprising that the wealthiest counties broke for a Gentner Drummond versus a Mike Mazzei, even though he was Secretary of Finance, he's a financial advisor, etc. He's relatively unknown in terms of economic policy making in the state, and so that is a pretty large certainty for those businesses and corporations. I just don't know how much Trump helped Mike Mazzei. I think he squeaked out that win, based on the fact that he was MAGA endorsed. But there is an Economist net approval rating poll out, or data that's out, that tracks Trump's approval rating. And right now in the state of Oklahoma, Trump is down 8 percentage points. And I think that contributes a little bit to Mike Mazzei, again, squeaking by in this race. If we're talking about just the kitchen table issues that normal traditional Oklahomans, I should say, are concerned about, right? Their gas bill, their utilities, their, feeding their kids. Are they going to, be able to pick them up for school? Are they going to have to work overtime? These things really resonate with Oklahomans. And so that negative 8% approval rating for Trump, I think, again, right, the cyclical nature, the reciprocity, right? A Trump endorsement is great if Trump is right on the up and up and is riding the wave of popularity, but that Trump endorsement, I don't know how much it really helped, at the end of the day, because Mazie is now going to have to either pivot, right, away from Trump in this general election, to
Hmm.
try to become this more moderate candidate to try to win over those independents, or he's going to have to just double down hard on the MAGA brand. And I think at this point, he's sort of painted himself in that corner, right? Roger Stone
Yeah,
allegedly tweeted, congratulations, or something to the effect that, I'm a kingmaker. I made the next Oklahoma governor. So
sure, right.
yeah,
Well, he
dude.
wants people to give
So
him
that
money
was a
to do the
long
same thing.
diatribe to not answer your question and talk about what I wanted to talk about. But yeah,
No, that's how we do it here. I heard that Mazie did a teletown hall just in the last week or so with Trump, like called in, which I mean, when you think
oh
about, I think when you look at this race, you've got a Trump endorsement, which should just be, I mean, like the kiss, that's all that needed, right? But he had the Trump endorsement, and then he had to have Trump like issue several
work,
messages, like
yeah,
put it out there, which
hmm,
might have helped with fundraising some, but Macy still had to loan himself $12 million,
yeah,
which is a ton of money. I mean, and Drummond didn't raise as much, didn't contribute as much of his own money,
mm,
raised more, so he had more kind of just like broad support, I think.
right,
But
right,
If Macy hadn't been able to loan himself his campaign that much money, I don't
right.
know that he would have won. So without Trump's endorsement or without being rich himself, and then in the last week he got endorsements from Mark Wayne Mullen
Yeah,
and from Josh Burkeen. So you had to bring in, but to be, I mean, think about it, for any other candidate to be endorsed by the president, by the senior,
right,
junior U.S. senator, no, well, not a senator anymore, but former U.S.
right.
senator, head of Homeland Security,
Homeland
um,
Security, yeah. That's a
um,
big get, honestly.
yeah, by members of Congress, all of
Mhm.
that, plus put in a ton of money and then just barely to win. I
Squeaked it
mean,
by.
yeah, you're not. I mean, I'm sure he woke up yesterday thinking, "Hell yeah, I did it! Like it was all worth it." But,
Sure.
but
But
golly, I mean, if something had gone the wrong way, and I'm sure Drummond's campaign is, kicking themselves in a lot of ways on how they could have done something different strategically. But you really think that like it shows, I think, that Mazie won this by the skin of his teeth.
yeah,
And as you said, in Oklahoma, even Donald Trump is currently a little underwater.
yeah,
Um, Now, I think broadly speaking, like on the generic ballot, Oklahoma this year right now
sure.
is sitting at like a R plus 20 or something. I mean, it's like a
I'm sure.
more,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
which is different than, so I was doing a lot of comparisons to 2018, to that
Mm-hmm.
runoff between Kevin Stitt and Mick Cornett, which I
Cornet.
think has a lot
Mm-hmm.
of parallels there.
It does.
Um, we had more, we have more Republican voters as a just a block
Yeah.
in Oklahoma now.
Right.
It's the number of registered Republicans has
Mm-hmm.
increased 36% since 2018. Um, and and so you have more voters,
Mm-hmm.
although a lot of them turned out, but a smaller percentage of them turned
Sure.
out.
Sure.
But I think even with that, and it is a more Republican environment in Oklahoma. In 2018, it was like a R plus 5 or 6, I think.
Yeah.
And we'll see. I think going into November, it's setting up to be something like a D plus 7 or 8, maybe environment nationally. Obviously,
Mm.
that varies quite a bit state to state. But I
Sure.
think here in Oklahoma, we're still looking at a pretty Republican environment, but
But
strong and growing, or at least strong anti-Trump sentiment right now.
yeah.
And then, so I think, it'll be curious to see if the old adage holds
Mm-hmm.
true that Democrats fall in line or no, excuse me, Democrats fall in love, but
Love.
Republicans fall in line.
Yep.
I think
Yep.
there will be a lot of Republicans who voted for Drummond this week
Mm-hmm.
that will come back and be like, well, I, you know, I don't love Mazie, but I'd rather have him than a Democrat. And I mean, we'll see, but
I don't know, dude.
we all know people in our families who are like, I'd rather have a bad Republican than a good Democrat. And I think that's the hard thing she's got to overcome in her
I don't
campaign.
know. I feel like he's got way more of an uphill battle than she does. Yes, we are a bloody conservative state. He's pulling down right now against her. And I just don't know, man. Like, I get it. If we're looking at traditional, the endorsement, the fact that he's a Republican, all of those check and check, he should be right, good to go. I don't know. I'm not sure right now about you know his popularity and it getting any better between now and November. The fact that he's really shied away from public appearances, and the fact that she's doing like 2-3 events a day, like she is putting in
Yeah,
FaceTime
yeah, yeah,
across this state. And again, that means something in a baby kissing state like Oklahoma. We like to see our politicians in our congregations, at Brahms, in Crest, right? We like that face to face intimacy with our politicians. And I don't know that Mazzei, I've just not seen it yet
right.
in this election, right? That warmth, that same thing that translates that Munson has. I've talked to several Republicans in this state who are not voting for Mazzei
Yeah.
in the general election, and one specifically has told me that they're likely going to vote for Munson. And so I don't know, honestly, that the older vanguard is going to swallow it this time around. I think that there are enough of the old school traditional conservatives in this state and around the nation who are just not willing to swallow the national political line whenever it is this divisive, whenever it is not moving the state forward or moving the nation forward. I don't know. I think we might be at that moment. And I'm not saying in any reality that Cindy Munson is going to be our next governor, but I am saying that she got a chance right now.
I mean, I think
I'm not sure.
right. You've got to run a perfect campaign and kind of thread the needle, I think. And you will undoubtedly pull some Republican support, but looking back, right, at the last several governor's races, going back to we'll go back 25 years. So 2002, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is when Brad Henry won. He was the last last Democratic candidate to get more than 42% or more than 43%. So Henry got 43.27 in 2002. He got a lot more in 2006 when he ran for re-election, but that has an incumbent bias. So Henry got a little over 43%. Jerry Askins ran, she got 40. Yep. Joe Dorman ran, he got 41. Drew Edmondson got 42. Joy Hoffmeister got 42. And so now you've got Cindy Munson, and it's like, if she can break 43, who knows? Obviously Mazzei could still win. There's a couple other candidates on the ballot, but she could do something the Democrats haven't done for 20 years, which is significant. And I think it kind of depends on what type of campaign these candidates choose to run, right?
Yeah.
Are they going to run a money-heavy, ad-centric, top-down campaign? Or are they going to be able to create the culture of relationships, right? Like the grassroots support. And I think that's, if I'm understanding correctly, I think that's the point you're probably making. And I certainly agree that if either candidate, and for this argument, if Munson's campaign can successfully muster broad-based grassroots support across the state, it's a different kind of campaign. And I say that because, while we talk about the outcome of what happened this week, only 22% of Oklahoma voters voted this week. So these are not decisions made by most people.
Right.
The number of people who voted for Mike Mazzei on Tuesday is less than 8% of all Oklahomans, right? Like a very small number of people. And so I think, I think credit again to Pat McFerrin. I think Pat said this on this other show, that the Munson campaign, everyone's talking right now, like, can she win over the Drummond supporters? Maybe. Yeah. But there are literally 75% of voters out there that did not vote for Mazzei or Drummond, who are, that's blue ocean territory, right? Like, you should be trying to win over those voters who did not feel represented enough or compelled enough to come to the polls in June or August and say, listen, I can be a candidate for you. I think that's the candidate who can win over the hearts and minds of the disaffected and the people that are too busy, too tuned out, or too soured on politics in America. that's the coalition that can be really powerful for propelling you, not just the governor's desk, but to ensuring that the policy outcomes that you want can happen, right? Like,
Yeah.
as what's the line from Hamilton, right? Like, winning is easy, governing is harder. But if you can come in with enough support to say, I want to vote for you and I want to support what you're doing, that's how you get people like, I don't know, Zoran Mamdani, who is winning over hearts and minds of New Yorkers, even those who didn't support him initially, that are saying, "Oh, geez, this guy knows how to get stuff done."
Exactly. There's a sliver of opportunity here, right? Because the policy issues that actually touch Oklahomans and their kitchen tables are not being discussed by the National Republican Party in a meaningful way. We're still talking about DEI. We're still talking about trans athletes. We're still talking about bathroom bills. We're still talking about things that average Oklahomans don't have any tethering to.
Yeah,
And so really Munson does have an opportunity. If she keeps the policy issues, she doesn't need to adopt the DSA line. She needs to really just keep things hyper local, do Oklahoma politics the way Oklahoma politics should be done, right? Traditionally, intimately, in a grassroots fashion, and build that network out. We're not a top-down state.
yeah,
We're not a top-down politics state, and that's something that I think the Mazzei campaign was able to sort of harness again that momentum from the national party, where we're being trained to be a top-down, right, political society, which is incredibly dangerous. But I hope, right, that seeing politics done in the traditional fashion, in the way that it should be done, where it is based on people. In a democracy, demos means people, right? It needs to be that central focus. And again, I've just not seen the Mazzei campaign out there doing the people facing stuff.
yeah, yeah. We'll see. I mean, they come from very different backgrounds, I think, right?
Incredibly
Obviously,
different.
Mazzei loaned himself $12 million. Cindy Munson drives a regular, like, a Hyundai, or like in, like,
Right.
is a rents her house, I think. I don't, but it's like a very, they're
As a
like,
normal millennial, probably, yes.
right. I mean, I don't always look forward to like political debates, but because there's,
Yeah.
I think, such a contrast. Like, this is very different, than even some of the races we saw this week, right? Where you've got like
Yeah.
two flavors of vanilla on the
Exactly.
ballot. But
Right.
these are two very different candidates, which I think is helpful to voters to be like, we're not just choosing between two of the same. We're choosing two very different
Right.
types of candidates and two very, very different like views for the future. And I'm just curious to see how it plays out. And
Yeah, I agree.
there's not a lot of days, but there's a lot of time between now and November. I think we've got
Mm-hmm.
less than 70 days. And so we'll get a brief reprieve from the texts and the ads and all that stuff. And that'll start back up here probably, next week, honestly, probably right after into September, we'll start seeing things pick back up. But it'll be really interesting. Really,
Yeah.
really interesting. Emily, we're almost out of time. I think we should at least mention, but maybe not.
Yes.
We don't have a ton of stuff to discuss yet, but the governor, in an effort to stay relevant and in the media,
Right.
yesterday
Poor guy.
issued a proclamation
Yeah.
that he wants to call a constitutional convention.
He sure
Well,
does.
I'd say that specifically, he passed, or he signed an executive order or executive proclamation, I guess,
Right.
to, he did it actually on Tuesday, but to set an election for April of next year that
Mm-hmm.
would be to, um, for the people to decide if they want to have a
Yes.
constitutional convention, right? So it's like a question if voters want to call a
Right.
convention, and then if so, what does that convention look like?
Look like. Right. Great.
This, why is he doing this?
I mean, so I described it to my OCCC class when they brought it up to me yesterday as the same situation. Look at me, I'm still governor. Look, hi, we just had a runoff election, but I'm still relevant. He had a chance to weigh in on this whenever the legislature was, right, running those bills and trying to decide, how they wanted their constitutional convention, if it made it through the process, to be structured. We talked about this all throughout February to May. And ultimately, thankfully, those proposals didn't go through because the structure of that constitutional convention would have been hella not representative, right? As the delegates would have been just your members of the legislature and a few other folks, right? Sparingly, no tribes represented, no real representation of minority parties or minority groups, etc. I think it's a last ditch effort for Stitch to again stay relevant, but also I think it's another little pivot, right? This is incredibly, democratic, right? We want to put this to a vote of the people. We, should be updating our social contract as the Constitution says we should be, etc. And I think in another small way, it's another pivot for Kevin Stitt towards the middle. Right. I'm trying to do these logical things. I want,
Right.
your participation, etc. I feel like this is another way for him to, sort of show his, commonsensical conservativeness, if you will,
Hmm.
in the waning days of his administration. Is it constitutional for him to do this?
That's the question.
Question mark.
I mean, he put it out initially as text messages started fluttering around
Right.
in group chats, people were like, "Oh my gosh, he's doing this." And then you started having like cooler heads weigh in and be like, "I don't think this is legal." I mean, someone's going to challenge it, I'm sure. Um,
Sure.
and the other thing that's funny about this, he's saying, "Hey, listen, the Constitution says every 20 years, the Oklahomans have the right to decide whether it's time to call a constitutional convention." And no one has even asked the voters for 56 years. Okay, since 1970. Fair,
Okay.
fair. However, non-doc again, thankfully, did the homework for us, so I don't have to.
Right.
Going back in history, so the last time this was on the ballot was 1970, and it failed
Mm-hmm.
with almost 77% of voters voting no.
How funny.
Before that was 20 years before that, 1950, and it failed with 69% of voters voting no.
Hmm.
And then before that, in 1926, so 25
Really?
years before that, it was on the ballot, and like 83% of people said no. So there have been three times in history,
Mhm.
right? 20 years after statehood, another 25 years after that, another 20
Yeah.
years after that, and each of those times, voters have overwhelmingly said, "No way, we're not doing a constitutional convention," and that's because they do stuff like this, where they're like, "We're going to do a convention, but only legislators get to be there." And like,
Exactly.
no one trusts that to happen.
Yeah.
I know people on both sides of the aisle who would agree that our Constitution needs to be
Sure.
freshened up. We need to edit.
Sure.
We need to. But then it's like, who's going to do it? Oh, I don't know. I don't trust them. I don't trust them. They don't trust
Right.
me. Okay, let's leave it as it is because we have the ability, when voters are willing, to amend the Constitution
That's
along the
right.
way.
Exactly.
And I think the thing that's funniest about this is that in 1994, the legislature sent a measure to the ballot, State Question 660, which
Mhm.
would have repealed this part of the Constitution that
Yeah.
requires the vote for a convention. And that also failed.
That's what feels. Yeah. Right.
Voters like, we don't want to do it, and we don't want to take it out. So
Right.
like, leave it there and again, people are like, I don't really know what you're doing here. You seem to be up to something. Uh,
Exactly.
don't
And
let's
that
just vote
feels
no.
quintessentially Oklahoman for me, though, right? We don't want the change and the structure, the fundamental structure and language of the Constitution to change because, I mean, based on past history,
Right.
recent history, your legislature is going to try to revoke a lot of those very populist rights that we have as individual citizens: initiative petition, the referendum, again, the weakened executive branch. The appointment authority was already changed by the legislature for the executive
Hmm.
branch, but I can imagine that a constitutional convention is going to completely restructure, the executive branch,
Hmm.
if folks, I mean, depending on the group of human beings who are lucky enough to become delegates, if they are those who are already in power, why would they not consolidate that power, right? And so that becomes, I think, the bigger question for everybody. And so I think it is quintessentially Oklahoman for us to be hella sus of any massive changes to our, the structure of our governance, but also hella sus that you want to take that opportunity away from
Hmm.
me, right?
Hmm.
Why
Hmm.
would you want to take that out of my constitution? I don't want to do
Hmm.
it, but also I want the right to say I don't want to do it. It's very
I may have
Oklahoman.
to work that into the title of this episode. Oklahoma should be hella sus.
Yes. Cheers.
Cheers. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. Emily, so good to be with you. This has been excellent.
Me too.
Really enjoy
Me too.
it.
It was fun. Yeah, this is a good one. Always. Election postmortems are always fun.
They are. Yes, you should have been here at the office yesterday as we all were coming in. We had a little staff meeting, and everyone was just very full of thoughts and feelings. And we had an intern start, and he was just like looking around. I was like, it's not normally like this. But it was real energetic for about an hour until we got it out of our system. So, listeners, thank you for being here as well. As always, school's back in session. Our schedules are, I don't know, calming down, at least becoming a little more regular. So our episodes will become more regular as well. If you haven't done it yet, please like and subscribe to our podcast on whatever app you're using. We also publish episodes on YouTube. If you would subscribe and like over there or share it, we try to be mostly camera ready most of the time. Today is great.
I mean,
If you've got specific questions too about the election, as we get into it, we're gonna, our show covers a lot of ground, but certainly this fall we'll be talking about the election. If you have specific questions or ideas, reach out to us anytime at podcast@letsfixthis.org. We'd love to hear from you. And remember, golly, we're gonna say it this week for sure: decisions are made by those who show up.
That's right.
Even those last 2,000 people who voted. You can make a big difference. So, all right, find a way to show up this week. We'll see you next week.